All right.
Good to go. All right, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate everybody for coming, for taking the time. I know everybody's busy. Appreciate Bob for setting it up. I think I've been talking about CSST, which is corrugated stainless steel tubing, is what we have. For a couple, I mean, I think your Williamsport branch, only everybody here is from here, I assume. Okay, that's right. That's right. I mean, I've seen so many guys, but you guys are doing a little bit of it up there. Yeah. So, but you know, as a market in terms of a territory that I cover, so I'm covering. I mean, theoretically for Harry Eklof, we cover from Scranton, Williamsport State College, all the way across to South Jersey, all the way down to Delaware. As a market, I think it's about $1 million market here in that territory for Wardflex. Once you get down to Maryland, Virginia, and a little bit of Delaware, the southern part of Delaware, it's like $4 or $5 million. So it's a big market. There's, again, I talked to Bob how much you guys get into this end of the business versus some of the other industrial stuff or some of the press, and we'll get into that because I think that's taken away from some of the market share of this anyway. The big player up here is Track Pipe. I don't know if you guys see it or hear it. So you have three main manufacturers. It's Track Pipe, it's Gas Type, and it's Wardflex. Wardflex being sister company of Ward. Everybody knows steel. I think you said you're Anvil. So domestic steel fittings, screw fittings, where you have the factory for Wardflex, Flossburg, and then we have Lawrenceville, which is Ward. So it's kind of all together, two towns across from each other. So getting back, back in the late 80s, I kind of give a little brief history. Back in the late 80s, Hitachi Metals is who brought this over to the United States. It was branded under a different company called like Soflex, just a different, same tubing, same everything, but a different brand. Joseph Ward, who owned Ward Foundry, started the whole company, bought into it in the early 80s and started producing it in the late 80s to early 90s, changed the name from Soflex to Wardflex. So this has really been in the market and industry since the mid-90s, let's say. So mid-90, 95, 96. I do remember I was doing purchasing down in Baltimore, and when this product first came out, when it first got whether or not it was first introduced to us as a wholesaler, and nobody wanted it. It's kind of like, I always use the analogy of guys that were doing plumbing and didn't want to switch from cast iron to PVC pipe. Everybody was, hey, you want pack and pour, you want this. It's kind of the same thing down there. So none of the inspectors wanted to approve this. So moving forward, us being one of the only manufacturers left of the three that still manufacture with yellow coating on it. And I don't know who was, Bob was telling me somebody went online and did it. Who went online and
yeah.
You went online and got your card already, basically? Which is strange to me because typically, and not to jump back, to get your card for Wardflex, you would have to have a card from somebody else. So like to be able to do it online, technically, is what I was told, is that you would have to have like a Track Pipe card or Gas Type. I guess, I don't even know if there's a spot to put that number in, and then you basically train yourself.
You found a loophole.
Yeah, listen, just make one up. I'm a strange guy. Well, I always say like how many.
Jeff, you can sell that information.
I always joke and say like how many homeowners can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and just buy steel fittings or they have a brand of, it's called like Home Shield or something that they have, that I thought you needed some kind of, we don't call this a certification as much as it's a training. Could go there and just buy without a contractor's card. You can just go, like as a homeowner, you just go and buy it, put the fittings. Everybody's stuff is proprietary, so their fittings fit their own pipe. It's not like copper fittings where it's a standard size or whatever. It will fit everybody's. It's not. So we're really the last manufacturer to still produce. This is the original coating. Everybody assumes gas is yellow. Like everybody, that's just it's like a standard code. When you see yellow pipe, you just assume it's gas. What happened was, when you're installing this type of piping, this type of jacket, you have to ground it or bond it, kind of like you would do. I know I just had to do this with a swimming pool, like when you have anything that's kind of electrical and it's kind of, they're worried about lightning strikes. So with this tubing, you have to use some sort of bonding. So usually it's a bonding clip, and then run it back to the electrical panel. So what happened was, this was one of the original coatings, the original, called a prototype. So it kind of morphed into, and I don't see it there. It went from this coating to this coating. So everybody, the other manufacturers, even including Wardflex, make this coating, and this is like a carbon coating. It's a lightning strike coating. So basically, if there was a lightning strike to the house or to the ground, this does not have to be grounded. That's the difference between this. Again, it's just got carbon in it. Some of them, gas tight has a mesh shield, like so you would cut this jacket back, has a wire mesh in it. We don't have that. We just have, it's a different like EPD polyethylene type carbon coating that goes inside of that jacket. So that's the difference. So of all the three, so really we offer these two. Nobody else kind of offers this. One would say, well, why would you want this if this is out there? Most of the inspectors, what I've heard and some of the job sites I've been on, they still want you to ground it. Whether this says, like if you read my literature, if you open the book and get into the installation catalog, it still says you have to ground this. I mean, it says you don't, for us, you do not have to ground this. This is already protected, it's lightning strike, you know, there's no lightning strikes. But when you get on the job, each county, each code for the inspectors are different. I've heard, I don't know how much work you do in New Jersey, maybe not much, they're not requiring you to ground this, but everybody else is. So the question becomes, if you have to ground it, why use that when you can just use this? It's cheaper. I mean, it's the same thing, it's exactly the same tubing, nothing's changed in terms of what's under the coating. It's all produced in the same factory, it's all under the same machinery, it's just two different coatings. I'll slide them around, you guys can feel them or not. Not too bad. So,
so what percentage do you sell?
Okay,
of
so
the different ones, yeah.
I probably sell in my market 80% yellow, 20% black. Now again, I'm going to go into maybe the sales side of things. I mean, we're in a market which is odd to me. So I probably should have introduced myself. I was previously with Mueller, 8 years. So you guys were buying my copper fittings and copper tubing and doing that stuff. Switched over to Harry Eklof. This market has been a track pipe market for 10, 15 years, probably since the product came out. They're trying to get a little bit more market share, trying to get a stranglehold on the market with this, which is surprising to me because it's right in Blossburg. It's right in our, technically in the backyard of everybody who's doing this work. Why we wouldn't stick, if everybody's domestic fittings, this stuff is in the factory right next door to the domestic plant. But for us to be able to get a foothold in the market, you got to lead with something. And I don't always like to lead with price. I mean, obviously we probably got some sales guys in here. You don't always want to lead with price. You want to lead with quality. I'll get into the quality of this piping and the tubing and the process of how it's made. But I have to start somewhere. So it goes, if I'm the same price as the next guy and the guy's been buying it for 15 years, why would he buy mine? So the pricing's the same. So you got to kind of come in, you got to be strategic. You don't want to destroy the market, right? We don't want to come in and say, okay, we're going to be 10 points, 15 points cheaper than what the guys are here. Essentially the same product, right? It's different fittings. All the standards are the same. Like everything's pretty much similar. We just have 3 different things that we do with our tubing that's different than everybody else's. So, so we're still producing yellow. Now, hey, if the code officials come out and say, okay, as of 2020, January 2020, if you use the black coated corrugated stainless steel tubing, you don't have to bond it, that's fine. We probably wouldn't make the yellow anymore. But it's competitive. So this is basically competitive to what everybody else's is in the black. This is a little bit cheaper. So depends. Some guys don't. I mean, the one question I've heard about this with some mechanicals was that if their guys forget to bond it. So it was kind of like they use the yellow. They have used our product before, but they prefer to use the black specifically because if they're on a job and the guy runs up tubing, and technically you're supposed to have a licensed electrician to bond it, not the plumber typically bonds it. He feels comfortable if they don't, say it doesn't get inspected, they don't bond, or say for whatever reason they just decide not to bond it and they leave us in, it's protected. You're not going to have an issue. You're not going to have a lightning strike. And I mean, there has to be, I forget what year it was, you may remember, Bob, there was a perfect storm of tubing was put in, there was a storm, something happened, it blew a house up. Nobody was home, it didn't kill anybody, but it was like all the elements pretty much were exactly the way they mixed together to make this, you know what I mean? So then that prompted, hey, we need to bond everything, we need to ground everything. So that's kind of like the push-pull that's going on right now. Some guys are don't bond it at all. If it's just a guy coming in buying a roll of tubing, he's putting in a water heater and he uses 3 feet of pipe. I mean, it's somewhere along the line, I'm sure it's bonded in the system, but if they're replacing something that's already existing, typically they're not bonding it. So But I don't know how familiar you guys are with this. Is anybody familiar with any flexible gas tubing, whether it's track pipe or whether it's gas tight? I just don't want to. I don't want to be redundant. But if you look in your books, and there's a sheet that says why Wardflex. And I always like to start with that. So if you look at the top 4 things, continuous run coils. I always like to start with that. There's no butt weld. So basically what it's saying is once it starts from a piece of flat steel and gets rounded off, if it's a 250 foot roll, a 300 foot roll, it's one continuous length. They don't fuse it together this way. They don't butt weld it that way. Obviously there is a TIG weld seam going up the side because it is flat rolled steel, but we don't have that because that's a point of as a weakness point. The second one is the step saver, the mechanical fittings. There. I'll pass it around. You guys can look at it. So it's basically, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but everybody kind of has a similar fitting. This is the seal. The second seal is inside. That little gasket that's inside is basically a second seal. None of the other manufacturers have 2 seals. Maybe some of the older product, since they had like a stab fitting, where now I think the new thing is like everything is just push on, kind of like a shark bite, but not. And then you have, of course, this one, which it has a split and you break it apart. So and we'll do that. We'll wrap it around the pipe. But a two seal fitting. Slap it that way. Third thing is helium vacuum tested. So once it's produced, once it comes from a piece of flat rolled steel to a piece of tubing, they pump helium in it because it'll go through any of the smallest pinholes that a piece of tubing will have, as opposed to air testing it or water testing it. And then the biggest thing, which I always tell myself I should have a piece here, or get the competitor's tubing here and cut the jacket off, not to throw anybody out there. We're double annealed, which just basically means it goes through the heating process twice. So what happens is it runs through a heater and then it runs through again, which makes it more pliable. So, and I should have this for my trainings. The other guys are only annealed once, a single anneal. So if I had contractors in here that dealt with this day in and day out, typically the biggest complaint is when you cut the roll open, it'll uncoil and almost like whack your eyeballs out, unless you hold that, obviously when you uncoil up a spool of it. But if you grab, and we already passed around, if you grab it, you can see here it's pliable. But trust me, the other guys only do a single anneal, and it's not that pliable. It's a little bit tougher. Ours is no kink. Theirs is no kink, but it definitely makes the difference. I was talking to Bob about doing a plant tour, and there's a part in the testing room where they have this all lined out. They put this on a pressure machine, and they pump it up to about 1200 psi. And typically the piping doesn't fail. It'll blow the fittings off. So it's been where this thing is stretched so far that the corrugations were gone, and then it blows the fitting off. We're rated for 25 psi, but what's 2 psi? Typically on a high pressure system you're going 2 psi, but it's rated to 25 psi. So really, I call them 3, but the 4 things that kind of make us stand out than everybody else. If anybody comes in and says there's a double anneal, it's not. It's definitely something that we've done. I think they've been double annealing tubing since the mid '90s, since they started producing the piping. So we really have. So what I like to do, in a typical training, I could go through from point A to point B. I like to grab the test that you guys all have in your book. So we kind of go through the test as we go. I give you the answers. We're going to talk about it. Well, we just listen as we go through each number. We'll talk about it as we go. It kind of covers all the bases. Any questions after any of these answers, any of the numbers, questions, anything you have, just stop me. We'll talk about it. There's going to be a little bit on here about pressure. We do a separate class. This doesn't affect your Wardflex training card. We do a lot just more on the pressure sizing. You have the slide guides here, the guides where you can size BTUs versus the size of the pipe. You figure out the sizing and on the run. So I kind of go through, there's front and back, so there's 35 questions. We'll go through that, and then I'll go back and we'll kind of talk a little more about the fittings. So Where a conflict exists between Wardflex and Wardflex 2, so just to be clear, this is Wardflex original. Wardflex 2 is just the Max, which is the black. That's really what that means, Wardflex Max. Design and installation guide and local code requirements shall take precedent. It's true. So even though in my book, in my installation guide, I'm telling you, when you install this pipe, you do not have to ground it. The code official is going to say if he wants it grounded or not. And that's, I was at a training show in New Jersey, and it's a weird one. It was a late night show. It was like a 5 to 9 show, and I had 3 engineers there. And it's funny because every engineer that I showed that to said, "Oh, no, you don't have to ground that." And then every plumber I talked to said, "Oh yeah, they make us do it." So it was weird. Like I was getting one answer from the engineers and then one answer from the contractor. So pretty funny. So that's true. Number 2, Wardflex step saver mechanical joint fittings having CSA, Canadian Standard Association certified for use in concealed locations. So basically what it's saying is, fittings going around, that you can put this in a wall and close the wall up. Unlike a shark bite or unlike any fitting that has a mechanical joint or kind of a union nut, typically you don't want that concealed in a wall. So we're saying if you take this fitting and you have to run it through a joist, say this is a joist and you're running it up through a plate of a 2x4 wall and you have to put a fitting here, it's okay to keep it inside the wall. It's safe. It's approved. No issues, no leaking issues. That is true. Number 2. Number 3, the Wardflex step saver mechanical joint fitting may be reused without replacing the gasket as long as the fitting components show no extensive physical damage and the retainer ring is intact. That's true. So if you got the fitting there, if you pull it apart, obviously it's common sense.
Sell more.
Basically, as long as that 2-piece ring that breaks apart when you take the nut off, that 2-piece ring inside of there is not damaged, which I've never seen it. Here it is pulled apart, and then you have the inside gasket. You basically can pull this apart and put it back together as many times as you like. Number 4, when assembling a Wardflex step saver mechanical joint fitting, the retainer ring should be placed 1 corrugation exposed between the end of the tubing and the retainer ring. And I'll go over that afterwards, but I did the last show I did. I needed my cutter. So basically, you have a cutter, you have the jacket, peel the jacket back. They want you to go 1, 2, which is more 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corrugations back, and just keep 5 corrugations exposed. And then this fitting goes, this O-ring seal goes on the first corrugation. Just might not be straight. That's 3/8. That's why. Let me show you. That's the rubber. Basically, cut back 5 corrugations, slide the nut on, it goes on the first corrugation right there. So you just have 1 corrugation at the top. Some of the other guys go 3 corrugations back, some of them go more. We're at the first corrugation. And that's basically a seal. So once you've cut the jacket back, once you put it on that first corrugation, however you want to do this, I've had guys use pipe wrenches, which is insane, but 2 crescent wrenches or whatever, you just tighten this up and that's your seal. That's really all you have to do. Look at that on there.
That's true.
Number 5, if the O-rings on the outdoor termination fitting appear damaged, that shall be replaced prior to the fitting being used. That's true. Anytime you see anything that looks damaged, that's a silly question. Anytime you see something that looks damaged, you're going to replace it. So the one thing that I like to talk about as we go, which we haven't sold a lot, this is underground CSST. Difference between the two is obviously the jacket. So if you were to run this underground, basically you have to sleeve it in something. You can direct bury this underground. The limitations are, this is, I'll say that still is double annealed, but because the jacket's so thick, you're not going to get as much play out of this. The only setback for this is it's really point A to point B. You're not going to have couplings, you're not going to have T's. You're going to run this under, say you're running under a driveway. It's got to be point A, there's a fitting here, it runs solid, fitting here, that's all you have. Males and females. And we only make it in 1/2 and 3/4. So, but the question being, if it seems like there's some kind of damage, you obviously aren't going to use the fitting. The O-ring. Number 6, Wardflex 2 may be used in both residential and commercial. Correct. That is true. Any place you see any kind of gas piping, you can run Wardflex. It's approved. Number 7, Wardflex and Wardflex 2 both may be used in new construction, remodeling, rehab, and retrofitting. That is true. Number 8, Wardflex 2 tubing is permitted to be directly buried underground or embedded in or around concrete slabs. I just said that. It is false because it's assuming you're using this. This test is probably before this was put out. Basically, if you're using this, you have to sleeve it some way, somehow. Since then, it had this. So the test actually needs to be updated a little bit. Number 9, Wardflex 2 may be cut to length and used as a direct connection to a movable appliance. That is false. So basically, you're going to run, and I'm going to probably duplicate some stuff. You have this, you run your Wardflex up. This is in the studded wall. From this point, you want to put a ball valve on, some sort of ball valve here, and then from this point to the gas dryer, the stove, you got to have a range connector, which I find funny when I talk about. So basically, it's saying you can't run this directly from the gas meter to the back of the stove or the back of the dryer. You got to have some kind of ball valve and a removable. Okay. So I find that funny because a lot of the competitors who probably at one point in time did manufacture yellow coated CSST say that the fact that we still make it is nobody uses yellow anymore, everybody's using black. But if you go to a home center, you go to a plumbing supply house, all the range connectors typically are yellow. You know, when you have the 5/8 or 3/4, whatever that size range connector is. So basically, you have to put it to a ball valve and then run a range connector to the movable appliance. Number 10, all movable appliances shall utilize a fixed termination point, such as an appliance stub out or Wardflex termination fitting. That's true. That's what I just showed you. So basically, we're trying to give you something like this. We even make them kind of like a washing machine box style. You can just recess this into the wall, kind of like a. I think IPS makes, OD makes washing machine boxes with valves in the box. It just makes it a little cleaner look. Number 11, Wardflex 2 tubing may be routed anywhere you would normally route black steel pipe. That is true. There's no limitations to where you can run Wardflex. Number 12, the minimum hole clearance when routing Wardflex 2 through a structural member is a ½ inch larger than the coated outside diameter of the tubing. That's true. So, you have a 2x4 wall. Here's your 2x4 wall. And then you're running this Wardflex through it. What it's saying is the hole that you drill through that plate has to be a ½ inch diameter larger than the outside of this piping. And that's just basically for pulling it purposes. You don't want to make, if this is 5/8 OD, you don't want to drill a 5/8 OD hole, where if a guy's on the second floor pulling this up through the basement and through the plate, he's going to rip the jacket. The jacket is not impenetrable. So basically, anytime you drill a hole for this tubing in any, whether it's a joist, a plate, a 2x4, it has to be a ½ inch larger than the outside diameter of the tubing. 13. And this, again, I'll read this. This kind of falls back to like the whole gas thing. The regulator manifold assembly should be located as close to the gas meter as possible on an elevated pressure system. Saying it should be located as close to the meter as possible, that's false. It should be the furthest point away. And again, we'll talk about it, Bob. Maybe we'll do another follow-up class, which is kind of like, it's just a shorter class, just talking about gas piping and it's just sizing. It just, like I said, it doesn't have a whole lot to do necessarily with getting your card, but it kind of helps if a customer needs some sizing questions. Number 14. When local code requirements permit in well-ventilated areas, a vent limiter may be installed as a substitute for the vertical vent line and a pressure-reducing regulator. That's true. I don't know if anybody's familiar with gas regulators. Again, it goes back. I'll just kind of make it real quick. This is your vent limiter. So basically, you have to run this. And I'm going to say it. It's going to be another question. You got to run it horizontal. There's a ball check in here. It's when the gas is pushed through. Obviously, you have a certain pressure coming into here. Once it hits here, it reduces the pressure. So the outlet pressure is different than the inlet pressure. This is the vent limiter. Basically, it's a vent in case there's any gas buildup. It pushes it up and it'll let gas out, so it doesn't create an explosion, basically. So what it's saying is, in certain situations where you have an open space, like if you have a huge room like this, you could probably run this, as long as it's horizontal, keep this in there. Another question is going to be, you're probably going to have to, if it's a closet or some kind of mechanical room that's smaller and you don't have enough air, you're going to have to run this, take this out, run this outside. And run, basically you're going to have to vent this off. So if there's any gas backup, it'll go outside. Alright, in a Wardflex 2 CSST system, one approved manual gas valve is required upstream of each pressure reducing regulator. That is true. Number 16. To work properly, a pressure regulator, reducing regulator must always be installed horizontal stem up position when a vent limiter is used. Goes back to what I was saying. There's like a ball check in here, so if you were to mount this vertical like that, this ball check is not going to operate correctly. You can mount it this way. If you take this out and you vent this to the outside, you can mount it vertical. Otherwise, everything has to, you can hear it in there, everything has to stay horizontal. You guys can see that. 17. When the use of a vent limiter is not permitted, the pressure reducing regulator must be vented to the outside atmosphere, which I just said, true. All right, on back, number 18. On an elevated pressure system, the pressure reducing regulator must be isolated and removed prior to pressure testing. It's kind of common sense, right? So you're running Wardflex through the house. You have a pressure regulator here. But you want to check, make sure you don't have any leaks. You don't want this regulator to be in line because this could be 2 pounds coming to the regulator, and once it gets to the other side, like we said, once you get to the other side of the regulator, it could be a ½ pound. So you want to take that regulator out or isolate it, however you want, however the mechanicals, however the contractors want to do it, and pressure test the system without a regulator in it. You want one consistent pressure, because then you would have to pressure test one side and you'd have to pressure test the other side. The PE coating, number 19. The PE coating on Wardflex 2 retains gas pressure. False. This is always at the point where I tell my Mueller story. So we were selling at the time copper tube with the yellow coating on it to a propane company down in like Solomon's Island, and I got a couple phone calls. They had some the customers were complaining that their propane tanks were in a week and a half, whatever the time frame was, they would just have to refill them. Come to find out, what they did was when they ran the copper out of the ground, what happened was the coating of the copper held. It was exposed. So say this is the ground level, come up out of the ground. There's tape that you typically would put on copper and on CSST. There's a tape. You don't want to have any. You want to have the least amount of stainless steel exposed, especially between here and the jacket. What happened is on the copper was water got between the jacket and the copper. It leaked all the way down, pitted and pinholed the copper, and the jacket. And I always tell this just because of the jacket. It held it for a while, and eventually it just pushed, and then the gas was coming out of the ground, in between the copper and the jacket. I mean, it was, I don't know, $250,000 claim. Come to find out in that story, I know you guys like to hear it, at the time Mueller didn't pay the claim because they didn't follow the instructions of the tubing of putting the wraparound between the seal between the coating and the copper itself. So if guys are doing this outside, we do sell like a mesh. It's like a black mesh tape. Kind of remind you of like Flex Seal, which I always joke about. Just goes in between. That keeps the water from just going down in between the jacket. But yeah, so this jacket does not retain gas pressure. So if you hit this with get a pinhole in it, it's not going to hold it.
We had our roof put on. Yeah, we drilled through it.
Yeah. Number 21. Oh no, number 20. The maximum operating pressure of Wardflex 2 is 25 psi. That's true. Like I said, we pressure test this thing up to almost 1,000 pounds. I mean, I've seen it go at 1,000 pounds. We rate it for 25, but if you're ever in that range of 25 psi, there's something wrong. You will never. Gas piping typically is nothing really above 2 pounds, but we rate it for 25. 21. The minimum test pressure for CSST system is 1.5 times the operating pressure, but no more than 3 psi. That is true. And again, that kind of falls back into the gas side of things. Number 22. Pressure testing of the installed Wardflex 2 system in new construction must be performed during roughing construction of the building before interior walls are finished. It's like, you know, putting plumbing in a house and then putting all the drywall up and then pressure testing it and then realizing you have to cut all the drywall back out because you have a leak. It's basically, you got to pressure test it before you put the walls up. And sometimes, listen, did anybody work in the mechanical world? You did. So sometimes I'm giving this presentation to mechanicals, and I feel silly saying that because these guys have been doing plumbing for like 25, 30, 40 years their whole life, and I'm telling them, well, just remember, when you install this, you can't put the wall up first. You have to pressure test. And the guys are looking at me, and they're like, who's this guy? I'll tell a funny story. I was at Walton Mechanical, and I first started, I sold Wardflex back in the 90s. I've installed gas tight, I'm kind of familiar with the system, and now kind of full circle, I'm selling Wardflex here. So it was kind of one of my first trainings, and I was there. There was a couple engineers. It was like it was a huge room. It was 25 guys in the room. But anyway, I made a false statement and said, the guy asked me, do you have to sleeve this on top of a building? Let's say you have a rooftop unit and you're running this outside. And because we were talking about sleeving it underground, I thought, okay, yeah, you do have to sleeve it. Again, probably shouldn't have said it if I wasn't 100% sure of the answer. Anyway, I said, yeah, you have to sleeve. And then the guy, there was an engineer, I swear, was sitting right here in front of me. He grabs the design guy and he goes, no, you don't. And he just calls me out in front of the whole room. And then again, you take it as it is and go, oh, okay, yeah, I was thinking it was that. But yeah, so that's silly. Always thought that funny story, but all right, new construction. Okay, number 23. Again, back to the pressure. In an elevated pressure system, there are two operating pressures downstream. That's true. Elevated pressure means you have, coming off the meter, you have two pressures going in two different directions. 24. When Wardflex 2 tubing is concealed within a vertical wall cavity, the tubing shall be secured to the stud. That is false. We go back to my 2x4. I should have a 2x4 and do this. 2x4, you're running the pipe up through. You have 2x4s here and here. You want to run it in the center if you can, between the joists. Reasoning is, contractor installs it in a house, they run it through. Everybody knows what's going to happen here, right? Here's a 2x4, you've banded it to the 2x4, right? Run it all the way up. Homeowner comes in and says, all right, I'm going to put a picture here. And what happens? They hammer a nail in and it misses the 2x4 and goes right into this. So basically you want this thing to move. You want it to be in the center. And there's another question we'll get over about how far in the center. And if a nail were to hit it or a screw, it's going to push it. So you want this thing to, you don't want it attached to anything.
Always a screw. No?
So,
Oops.
yeah.
Williamsport last year, we had a roof one put on.
We drilled through it.
They had too long
Oh,
screws.
that's right.
We had told them, I said, listen, them screws look awful long. Did you guys come in and map this out, knowing where our gas line is? Because I don't know who might have installed it too close. Also, there might be some different.
Gotcha.
Well, you knew who installed it.
What?
You knew who installed it.
Well, yeah, but it's being videoed, so we don't want to.
That's true. Don't throw anybody on the bus.
But anyhow, they come right down through, and of course, it was fast, so it didn't flex, and it just came down over the outside of it, but it hit enough of it. And one of the guys come up and got me and said, "Hey, I smell gas." I said, "Yeah, so do I." So we went up. They ran me up to where it was. I was hearing it hissing.
Oh, you could hear it.
Oh yeah, and we didn't have a ball valve to it to shut it off.
Yeah. So you had to go out to the street? How do you shut that off?
We had to call the gas company. Yeah, run. We called the gas company. They come in and shut the main off.
Yeah.
Well, and then of course the fire company came and we had to be evacuated.
Oh, wow.
And it was a whole big fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard those stories. I mean,
Yeah.
it happens. I hear it more in water, right? You hear guys drilling into a water line or
Right.
something. And typically you do attach, I mean, I've been in the plumbing world for 25 years. And guys do attach water lines with talons or whatever. So they do get attached to the studs and all that. But yeah, definitely on this, it's, you know, and I guess years ago you didn't have that issue, right? Because it was all steel. Everything was all, you know, steel. You didn't have to worry about anything penetrating it. So that's crazy. You're right. 25.
Sorry, honey. That's Genghis.
Don't want to blow up the house.
Of course, then they want to do that sticky crap all over the place.
Yeah. Yes. 25. When installed in concealed locations, Wardflex 2 shall be mechanically protected. Shall be mechanically protected if it's within 3 inches of a potential puncture, such as screws, nails, etc. True. So basically, what it's saying is, if you're in a joist, you know, you have a 12-inch joist, and you want to be 3 inches off the bottom. If you're a 2x4 is a little tough, and I'm sure the question's going to come up about nail plates. You want to be if it's 3 inches away from any of that, and you're fine. So apparently they use something longer than a 3-inch screw or whatever. But so yeah, anything that's within 3 inches, you have to use some type, which is going to come up with some sort of protection plate, nail plate. 26. Here we go. Protection plates used for copper pipe and water systems may be substituted for Wardflex striker plates. It's false. I don't know how much the inspector is really going to notice. We have 17 gauge plates. And I don't know if you guys get into Boca plates or any of those. Typically, they're little. Typically, it's this. That's typically like a plate that you will see. It'll be on a stud if it's going up, and that's usually for the water lines. This, I mean, we make them half, we make them full. They want you to use 17 gauge for that reason, because with the equipment today, I guess, I mean, the drills and stuff could go through one of those smaller. It's like a white metal. There's really no meat to it, but you guys, you can see that, you can feel the difference with that guy. It's just a heavy duty guy, but most guys don't care. I mean, I'm in room mechanicals. They're like, inspector's not looking at the plate to see if there's 17 gauge on there, if it's not, you know, if it's 20 gauge. 27, 12 inches. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this before. Everybody tells me they've never seen this product before.
We had it on our show.
You do? Okay, good.
I don't think we've sold it.
Yeah, 12 inches of strip wound conduit is required at Wardflex or Wardflex 2 termination fittings or appliance stub outs to add extra protection. It's true. Basically, guys look at this and they think it's tubing, but this is basically just a protection wrap that you would put, you know, I should get that off of there. You know, put it in this situation here. If you're running that way, if you kind of got a 90, if you can bend it, just run it up through. This is extra protection where this goes through the wall. It's just, some guys use it, some guys don't. I've seen a lot of this used if you're running the gas piping, say at the front of your house, so you have your siding, you have your sheathing, and then you have this ramp in between the walls going up front, in the front of the house, or anywhere. It could be on any side of front. You want to run this in any kind of wall cavity where it's open and exposed, unless you can move it into the middle, kind of like that 3-inch diameter. But guys have used this, but it's expensive. I mean, we have it.
What does that protect from?
A nail, any kind of, same thing. It's just added, if you read it, it's just added extra protection. At any kind of fixed, so basically it's basically saying that anytime you stub out of a wall, a floor with any one of these, or even if you don't use them, you should use that to protect it. I don't think code says you have to do that again, but Wardflex is saying, hey, you might want to protect it. Kind of back to the pressure thing, the EHD, the equivalent hydraulic diameter, measures the actual diameter of the tubing. It's false. There's numbers on the pipe. We get into that when we're doing some of the gas piping. There's numbers on the pipe that represent the size. Sometimes if you look at our catalog, our parts listing versus another guy's, those numbers are different. So you don't want to go off of those numbers. I think like some of them are just, this is all squeezed out. I don't have it on here. But there's a code number that every piece of tubing goes to every however many feet, and every pipe's different. Every manufacturer has a different size on there. And there's a question here about that. And this next one, when sizing a Wardflex 2 system is 29. Oh, that's not it. Low pressure system, the distance from the furthest appliance to the meter must be considered to size the system correctly unless the pressure drop per foot method is used. So basically it's saying you have to go from one end to the other to get the BTUs. You have to size it that way. Basically, you're using. We got the sizing charts here. I don't have one here, but you have them in the folders. So you got to go from the meter to the furthest point, figure out what the BTUs are, and that pretty much tells you what size diameter pipe you need to run. The biggest problem I have now with guys, because everything's changed. Everybody wants tankless. So if you had, let's say you had a 40-gallon gas water heater that only was, whatever, 40,000 BTUs, and then now all of a sudden they're putting in a tankless water heater, and it might be 110,000 BTUs. We've just changed the size of the pipe. That gas is not, again, it may work, again, in a house where, you know, it's all about max, it's all about max use, right? So when you're trying to size a house up, you're assuming you're running the gas dryer, the gas stove, the furnace, the fireplace, the gas, all that at the same time, so you have enough BTUs to cover everything. A lot of times this does work if you put in a tankless water heater, but you don't size this. And the line may be correct. You may have, I mean, typically, I mean, the smallest size, we do make 3/8. I don't know if you guys stock 3/8. I mean, typically 1/2 inch or higher is typically what you're going to sell. But basically, if you had a 3/4 line in, and then all of a sudden you just added 75,000 more BTUs to this point that's furthest from the meter, you may have to resize that line up. And I sell a lot of Wardflex in that situation. They don't realize it until winter time when you're running your heat more, you're running, or even summer, if you're, whatever you're running. And then all of a sudden you don't have enough juice to get to, enough BTUs of gas to get to the unit, it doesn't run properly. 30. When sizing a Wardflex 2 gas piping system, any manufacturer CSST sizing chart can be used. That's false. Again, what I'm saying, you want to use our fittings, our pipe, our chart. We specify everything to what our sizing guides are all specific to our tubing and our fittings. 31. A Wardflex 2 identification card must be attached to the piping system as a visible location regardless of the length of the pipe installed. That's true. It's just this guy. And it typically comes, everybody says, well, where do you get them from? We do have them. I don't even know if guys even ask for them, but typically it's like hanging it. It's like, I always say it's like putting a tag on a mattress or whatever. Typically I just want you hanging this off. Just gives you all the kind of do's and don'ts of Wardflex. The next 4 are on bonding. I think I kind of covered that a little bit where essentially typically the plumbers don't bond the tubing. It's the electricians, but really all it is just this clamp over the tubing and running it back to the electrical panel. Just a clamp, get them anywhere. 32. When bonding a gas pipe system or Wardflex CSST has been installed, the bonding conductor wire shall be attached to the building electrical grounding system. It's true. 33. Ward manufacturing does not require any additional bonding of gas piping systems where Wardflex 2, Wardflex Max, Black, CSST is installed. That is true, but we know local code is gonna overtake that depending on where you're at. 34. A maximum 6 AWG wire, copper wire is required for direct bonding of a system. That's false. So a minimum of 6 on the sizing of the wire. And then 35. A qualified person as defined by the authority having jurisdiction must perform the direct bonding of the CST, Wardflex CSST. That's true. Basically saying an electrician. I kind of go through that. A lot of times I do that first. You get a lot of mechanicals in the room that, like, if you try to, typically this is about a 45-minute to an hour presentation, but sometimes these guys are running, so, and you're losing them when I get through and a lot of them already know it. Like, so again, I go back to sitting here and there's a guy, 65 years old, and he's been doing plumbing his whole life, and I'm trying to tell him how to do it, and it just doesn't work. So I usually do that. So, and then I'll just kind of go back and I'll just kind of show you guys, like, just on the tubing side. The last training I was at, I didn't realize this till I got here. The guy one of the mechanicals wanted my tubing cutter, which I gave him, and I didn't order one. So, but typically, you're going to pull this off the roll. And like I said, it's hard to tell 5 corrugations unless you look at it, but you can kind of gauge it. I use typical guys. You can use a straight razor knife. This just has a little hook blade on it. Just kind of spin it around, kind of run it underneath, and just peel this off. You always want a clean cut. The tubing cutters that we sell, same tubing cutters everybody has. The one thing is it's a stainless steel cutter wheel as opposed to just metal. I know Rigid makes a decent one. This is made. It's an off-brand, but it's specific made. It's got 6 wheels on it, so it spins around easier on the tubing. And they like you to use it specific to stainless steel versus, but most plumbers aren't going to just have one cutter for stainless, one cutter for copper. But basically, yeah. So just make sure you get a nice clean cut. You just cut it off, like I said, and everything. And we went through everything that goes in terms of the fitting. First corrugation, nut, screw it together, and that's it. There's not much to installing the tubing. I think the biggest part is figuring out what size you need. Every time I talk to somebody, it's all about the sizing. They don't know. How do you know whether to run 3/4, 1/2 inch? What we talked about, just the BTUs. You have to. And when I come back, if we want to do this, we'll do like I have a charts where it's like a water heater, gas dryer, this, and everything has BTUs set, and you just kind of plug in the BTUs, you add them all together. It's common sense, and then you go, okay, well, this many. You look at the chart, and it says you need to have this many BTUs. If you go into, I had this marked off. There's a lot of sizing charts in the back. If you go to the back, say like 48 on, I won't get into all the pressure, but it has every sizing chart for every, every gas system, every application, whether it's a glow gas, it's LP, half PSI to 2 PSI. But like I said, it's one of the things I think I talked about. One of the things I'm seeing is, and you guys are big with Viega press, and I'm surprised that Ward hasn't really kind of jumped the gun here and just made a press fitting, right? So you have a contractor that's invested all this money into a tool, a press gun, or this, whatever, the jaws, whatever he needs for steel, whether it's stainless steel or regular steel or even copper. And if you got it, you've spent that money on the tool, why not just use that, Again, if you have to run through a system where you're kind of doing this, and you're bending up and over, obviously this is going to be the application to use, instead of using all those 90s, cutting the pipe and then kind of putting press. But I'm just seeing a lot of steel press, the mega press, taking some of the market share. The guy has the gun, and it's just, the main is a 2-inch main, and he's running it. It's just a no-brainer just to run press. And then he may branch off with CSST, but a lot of the mains are done in steel anyway. And again, we have, might be another one, but we basically have, we have 26-foot rolls now. I don't know if you knew that. It's a little bit more money. It's still, whether it's half, it's usually half by 26, which is something that the contractors wanted us to make, so it's a little easier. I don't know if you guys sell it by foot or you sell it by roll.
By foot.
You do. It's amazing. It's 50-50. I get a lot of guys that don't. They make you buy a roll, and then you get some companies where you can buy 3 foot. But the 26-footers kind of make sense. If a guy needs 15-20 feet, just give him a 26-foot roll. He pays for a little bit of extra. A lot of times, what happens when you get down to the last, if you have 15 feet left, the guy needs 12. You just probably sell him 15 feet anyway. They make different rolls. You'll see it. You can have these rolls in your warehouse. It's still a roll. I don't know if this is overkill buying that, but it's like a stand. So basically, it makes it easier to roll the tubing out. I don't think I got much into the termination fittings, but pretty much the same as the manifolds, for that matter. We basically have termination like this style termination where you can go through the floor, tubing comes through, we have the fittings, just like a floor flange or ceiling flange, whatever you want to have. We make all the manifolds. It's in the installation guide. I think they make them up to 4 or 5 ports. Really, for us, in terms of competition, we pretty much have everything that everybody. We're all kind of equal. That's why I always say, like, if a guy's used to installing track pipe, typically he installs track pipe. If he's used to Wardflex, it's typically Wardflex. I don't have but I think at the end of the day for us, I think one of the difference is those 4 things I had on the front, but really the annealing of the pipe, you'd be surprised how many times I heard that. So I was sitting at a trade show in Westchester a couple months ago, and all 3 of us were there. So it was me and the other 2 manufacturers, and I was first. So I strategically put myself first, so that every contractor that came by me, and I said, here, and they grabbed it and they're doing this, and I'm like, all right, well, go and see the other 2 guys and tell me what you think when you come back. Not everybody came back. I had a couple guys that said yes. I had a couple guys say I couldn't tell the difference, but I was trying to make that point that this, and maybe that's not as much of a selling point to some guys. Some guys just look at the bottom line, but I just think for you guys, if you're selling it, if you see it, it's a big thing. And the fact that we still do make the yellow, and it's just competitive. It's more competitive, and it does the exact same thing if you're going to bond it anyway. A lot of times it's already put into the job, I imagine. I guess it's on the electrical side. So plumbers can use either one they want. Ball valves, I think it's all in there, like the whole list. Ball valves, boxes, A lot of stub outs, different ways, whether it's a 90, we have straights, we have them up to 12 inches here. Outdoor, on the ground, you can run it outdoors. So getting back to my story about the rooftop system, it's UV protected. You do not have to shield it. You can run it outside. You can run it under your deck, run it through the floor, you know, come up through and put it here and have your grill, come off that to your grill. I think there's a lot of different applications that way. I think that's it in terms of just the overall of the tubing. If you guys have any questions, just like I said, let me know. But we kind of do a little bit more. I go back to the gas. We do a little bit more. I probably have like a little 20-minute, half-hour presentation of that. I don't have. I have some of the literature has been back ordered, but it doesn't affect, like I said, you guys in terms of getting your cards. The old way of doing the cards was you had like a carbon copy. What I've been doing is just have you guys just put your name, and I know you guys work here, and your email address and a phone number on here for me, and then I'll have electronically the cards will be sent to your email. It usually takes about a week. So if today's Monday, you should have your cards by Friday. No worse than the beginning of next week.
I wish I could do a social security card now.
Oh, he can do that for you too. For an
One thing I like
extra
to do
$5 Social Security card.
Just put your social security number on it.
That's crazy. Well, you're already good. Well, the one thing about us is that competition-wise here, you don't really have anybody. There's nobody else stocking Wardflex.
Yeah, actually, I just went on and viewed for the certifications, if you says you just enter none, not put down who sales. So let me go through and go.
That's weird. Again, you know, so it's part of my background, leaving Mueller to come to Harry Eklof, I was really hired just specifically for Wardflex to have more market presence in the market, and everything that I've been told was